On most days, American elections look like noise. Attack ads, debates, polls, pundits shouting over B-roll of flags and crowds. But every once in a while, you catch a glimpse of the machine underneath the noise, and for a second, you see who actually has their hands on the controls. This story begins with a video that was never meant to stay visible. Not because it was illegal, not because it was shocking, but because it did its job, and then it was wiped. Someone had tried to scrub this thing from the internet. Copies gone, pages 404'd, accounts deleted. But eventually, a stray file surfaces. The ad plays. When Donald Trump was president, life was a lot better. He's been clear, he does not support a federal abortion ban. And that's why I'm with Trump. The framing is careful, almost surgical. A young woman, calm tone, reassuring. This is not a red hat rally chant spot. It's aimed at someone else entirely. Women who support abortion rights but might still be persuaded to vote for Trump. So the question is not what the ad says. The question is, who wanted this to disappear? And why did someone spend so much money to show it, and then even more effort to bury its tracks? It's time to print some paper. October 2024, final stretch to the U.S. presidential election. Somewhere in Meta's ad transparency reports, a pattern appears. Roughly $20 million in digital ad spend goes out the door. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all in support of Donald Trump. Drill down further. One particular cluster of ads gets about $350,000 in spend, targeting primarily women under 44 in Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Carolina, Wisconsin. In other words, swing state women who could decide the election. And the ad we just watched? It's one of those. So far, this is standard political warfare. Heavy spending, targeted demographics, digital saturation. The real mystery is the line at the bottom of the ad. Paid for by RBG PAC. RBG. As in Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the liberal icon of the Supreme Court, pro-choice, feminist, hero of the left. And yet, her initials are now being used to push a pro-Trump message to pro-choice voters. Ruth Bader Ginsburg died in 2020. This ad runs 4 years later. She obviously didn't fund it. So what is RBG PAC? Go to rbgpac.com today and you get nothing. Domain gone. Traces wiped. But the internet has a memory. The Wayback Machine reveals a snapshot. A stark graphic showing Trump and Ginsburg side by side. Tagline, "Great minds think alike." The implication is surreal. A conservative populist and a liberal judicial icon, supposedly aligned. But the rhetoric isn't the point. The paperwork is. Open the FEC filings. Look at the officers, the treasurer, the contact. One name keeps showing up. May Mailman. She's a real person, a conservative lawyer, frequent Fox News guest, former government staffer, well-connected in Republican legal circles. But nothing in her background suggests she personally has $20 million to fuel last-minute ad blitzes in swing states. Journalists try asking her about RBG PAC. She doesn't answer. So you follow the filings further. Campaign finance reports have a boring name. Report of Receipts and Disbursements. But inside, they tell you who actually funded what. You open the file and see a wall of zeros. 0 cash on hand. 0 receipts declared. 0 disbursements, at least up to a certain date. And yet Meta's ad library shows tens of millions in ads already bought. The math is impossible, unless you know the timing trick. Election law has a blind spot built into it. Under federal rules, any money received after October 16th doesn't have to be disclosed until December of that year. The election is in early November. So if you flood a political committee with cash in the final weeks, they don't have to say where it came from until after the votes are counted. By design, the money is invisible when it matters most. In October, the ad campaigns run. In November, the election happens. Trump wins. Victories are declared, narratives are set, and buried in the post-election haze 1 month later, RBG PAC finally files its updated report. This time, the zeros are gone. In their place, a single massive line item, $20 million, from Elon Musk Revocable Trust. Mystery solved. Sort of. The Elon Musk Revocable Trust is not some obscure vehicle. It's the legal entity through which Elon Musk holds much of his wealth, including huge blocks of Tesla stock. When that trust moves money, it's Elon moving money. And according to the filing, it funneled $20 million into RBG PAC. RBG PAC then spent that money saturating key swing state women with a message, "You can be pro-choice and still vote for Trump." That $20 million, by the way, was just one slice of Musk's overall role. Across the 2024 cycle, he spends roughly $290 million, an all-time record for a single individual in a U.S. election. Then, once the election is over and the disclosure window has passed, the structure collapses like a disposable stage set. RBG PAC is dissolved. The website vanishes. The YouTube channel disappears. The Twitter account is deleted. The digital fingerprints fade, leaving only dry FEC PDFs and a ghostly memory in Meta's archives. Everything technically followed the rules. Nothing here was illegal. But the pattern is unmistakable. One billionaire, one bespoke PAC, tens of millions in darkened influence at the exact moment when voters were most persuadable, with his name safely hidden until it was too late to matter. And Elon Musk is not alone. Across that cycle, multiple ultra-wealthy Americans quietly route more than $50 million each into similar efforts, from both the left and the right. Zoom out further. The total spent on the 2024 elections reaches nearly $15 billion. But raw numbers don't mean much until you put them in context. Take that $15 billion and divide it by population. Now compare it to other democracies. The graph spikes. On a per-voter basis, U.S. elections are some of the most expensive on Earth. Yet when you ask ordinary Americans, from left, right, and center, something rare appears: agreement. Poll after poll shows strong majorities believe there should be limits on how much money any one person can spend to influence politics. Even when you break the responses down by party, the consensus holds. Americans may disagree on almost everything, but they agree that the current money system feels wrong. So how did we end up in a world where some individuals can legally spend hundreds of millions of dollars on elections, while most people think that amount of influence should never exist? To answer that, we have to zoom out, past Elon, past RBG PAC, back into the circuitry of the system itself. And to navigate that system, we need a guide. Enter the billionaire narrator. The screen dims. A man steps into frame. Perfectly tailored suit. A monocle that never quite fits. More caricature than person, because he isn't one person. He's an archetype. "Hi, I'm Jonald Harris III," he says. "The 1% of the 1%. I am richer than you, your friends, and everyone you've ever met combined. And I have a dream. Not to run for office, not to knock doors, not to argue on TV. I want to change politics the way people like me change everything, with money." He shrugs, almost bored. "I might want lower taxes, or fewer regulations, or a government that treats crypto like holy scripture, or more aggressive climate policy, or stronger ties to Israel, or looser rules on AI. You don't get to know which. That's my business. Your job is to vote. My job is to shape what you see before you vote." He smiles. Throughout this story, we'll be checking in with me to see how much influence I'm allowed to buy without technically breaking any laws. The camera cuts back to the main narrator, because to understand how someone like Jonald exists, you have to rewind to a moment when the system tried, very briefly, to stop him. Rewinding campaign finance is like scrolling back through a glitchy security tape. You see flashes of scandals, laws, court cases, but underneath all of it, one question never changes. How much is a democracy worth to people who can afford to buy pieces of it? To answer that, we have to go to the last time Americans were genuinely horrified by political money. And it starts, like so many American political nightmares, at a hotel. Washington, D.C., June 1972. 5 men are caught breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate complex. At first, it looks like a clumsy burglary. Then the threads start to pull. Wiretaps, surveillance, cash, a lot of cash. Journalists and investigators discovered that this wasn't just a rogue operation. It was part of a broader campaign run by people around President Richard Nixon, funded by a secret, illegal money pipeline flowing into his re-election effort. Corporate donations to federal campaigns had technically been illegal since 1907, but corporations were still quietly writing checks, large ones. Every major corporation was being hit up by the Nixon campaign for at least $100,000, one insider later recalls. American Airlines routed money through a bank in Lebanon to hide the trail. Others sent literal bags of cash. It was the dream world for someone like our fictional billionaire, Jonald. No contribution limits, no paper trail, no transparency, he says. You pay, they win, they owe you. Simple. But Watergate blows that world apart. Nixon wins re-election in a landslide. Then the scandal detonates. Audio tapes, cover-ups, criminal charges. Public trust in government falls through the floor. Faced with the evidence, Congress finally admits what everyone can see. The break-in, the spying, the dirty tricks, they weren't just about one bad president. They were made possible by an excess of campaign donations, many of them secret and illicitly obtained. If you don't change how the money flows, you don't change the behavior. In the mid-1970s, Congress decides to rebuild the system. They create a new cop on the beat, the Federal Election Commission, FEC. The idea is simple: no more mystery money, no more briefcases of cash. Every political dollar should leave footprints. Think of it like a set of pipes. At the most basic level, money in U.S. elections can move through a few core channels. Individuals to candidates. Individuals to parties. Parties to candidates. Candidates/parties to ads, mailers, phone banks, events. And hovering outside that core, there's a separate pipe. Individuals to independent spending, paying for your own ads, your own messaging. In the post-Watergate panic, Congress does 2 big things. First, transparency. They make all those pipes visible. Every significant donation and expenditure must be reported to the FEC. The FEC then publishes that data so anyone, journalist, citizen, rival campaign, can scrutinize it. This is why, decades later, we were able to track the Elon Musk Revocable Trust RBG PAC pipeline. It's why we can see who gave what to whom, even years after the fact. Second, limits. Congress makes the pipes narrow. They cap how much one person can give directly to a candidate or party. In the 1970s, that cap is set at $1,000 per candidate per election. Over time, it rises with inflation to roughly $7,000 in today's money. The key idea is radical for someone like Jonald. Even if I'm a billionaire, I'm supposed to have the same contribution limit as the guy bagging groceries, he grumbles. That's offensive. To reformers, that's the point. To prevent a repeat of Watergate, they want to end the corrosive and corrupting influence of private money in public life. For a brief moment, it looks like they might actually mean it. But in America, no political story ends with Congress. It ends in court. A group of politicians and wealthy donors, including Senator James Buckley, sue the government, arguing that these new limits violate their rights. The case, Buckley v. Velo, reaches the Supreme Court. Sitting on that court is a man whose fingerprints will be on everything that follows: Lewis Powell. Just a few years earlier, Powell wrote a memo for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce arguing that American business needed to fight harder in politics, using the courts and the Constitution itself as weapons. Now he's in the perfect position to do exactly that. The Supreme Court issues a compromise ruling that, on paper, tries to balance anti-corruption goals with free speech. In practice, it creates the loophole that will shape the next half-century. The court makes a distinction between giving and spending. Giving money to a candidate or party, risk, quid pro quo corruption. You give them $100,000, they feel like they owe you. Conclusion: the government can limit this kind of contribution to prevent corruption or the appearance of corruption. Spending money independently to influence an election, example, you buy your own ads supporting a candidate without coordinating with their campaign. Court's conclusion? That is political speech in its purest form. If the government limits how much you can spend on your own message, it's effectively limiting how loudly you can speak. The court said, regulating money in that context is regulating speech, says our narrator, and speech is protected by the First Amendment. So, the court upholds limits on contributions, but strikes down limits on independent expenditures. In other words, you can't give unlimited money directly to a candidate, but you can spend unlimited money on your own to help them, as long as you're not formally coordinating. For someone like Jonald, this is a revelation. I still can't write a $10 million check straight to my favorite candidate, he sighs. But, in theory, I can spend $10 million on my own praising them. The problem is, I'm not a campaign strategist. I don't know how to design an ad, buy airtime, target voters. I make my money in software or shipping or finance, not political marketing. And there's another problem from his perspective. Everything is still transparent. If he runs his own big ad campaign, every report will say, paid for by Jonald Harris III. He wants influence, but he doesn't always want the spotlight. So, for a while, the system sits in this awkward balance. Money can't flow directly in huge amounts to candidates, but wealthy people could, in theory, spend heavily on their own. The next big evolution comes from a place you wouldn't expect. TV ads in the 1990s that sound like campaign spots, but don't quite cross the line. You're watching television in the late 90s. A somber announcer talks over grainy footage. It all comes down to values, what you believe in, what you sacrifice for, what you stand for. You see a politician's face. Their record is criticized. Their character is questioned. But something's missing. The ad never says, vote for, vote against, elect, defeat. Those are what campaign lawyers call the magic words. If you don't use those words, you can claim, this isn't a campaign ad, it's an issue ad. We're just talking about public policy. That legal distinction cracks the floodgates back open. Political parties and allied groups start raising unlimited soft money from wealthy donors and corporations, not for a candidate, but for party-building activities and issue advocacy. They then pour that money into ads that are obviously about elections, but technically avoid the magic words. Jonald loves this. You're telling me parties can raise unlimited money again? As long as they pretend their ads are about issues and not campaigns, he says. This is beautiful. Corporations, long barred from direct spending in federal elections, see an opening. They begin funding front groups with names like Citizens for Better Medicare. That sounds like a grassroots citizen coalition. In reality, many of these are vehicles for pharmaceutical companies and industry groups. They pay for ads attacking or praising specific politicians under the guise of issue education. No magic words, so technically not campaign ads. The pipe is back. Corporations through Citizens for Better Medicare or similar. That group through ads about a candidate. No explicit vote for/against, so the spending skirts old prohibitions. And these groups notice another benefit. The disclosures only show the intermediary name. Front groups, Jonald nods, middlemen. I don't have to stand in the spotlight. I just need a patriotic-sounding brand to soak up the attention. By the late 1990s, the system that Watergate supposedly killed is back, this time dressed in legal nuance and technicalities. Unlimited money is sloshing through the pipes again, much of it corporate, much of it routed through deliberately vague organizations. And once again, Congress is forced to admit, we've lost control. In 2002, an unlikely political duo steps forward. Senator John McCain, Republican of Arizona. Senator Russ Feingold, Democrat of Wisconsin. They craft a sweeping reform package, the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, better known as McCain-Feingold. Its core goals: shut down soft money to parties from corporations and unions. Ban issue ads funded by corporations and unions in the final stretch before elections if they mention candidates by name. Plug the magic words loophole by focusing on timing and content, not just explicit vote for, against. In plain language, if an ad quacks like a campaign ad and walks like a campaign ad, it's going to be treated like a campaign ad. For a brief moment, it looks like the system might tighten again. No more corporate-funded issue ads masquerading as neutral. No more unlimited soft money into party coffers. Congress, once again, declares the era of unlimited private money over. Loophole closed, loophole closed, loophole closed, our narrator says. At least on paper. But for rich players like Jonald, this isn't the end. It's a challenge. They close the old doors, he says, squinting at the new law. So now we find a window. Or better yet, we take it to court. And somewhere out on the political fringes, a small conservative nonprofit called Citizens United is already loading the next case into the chamber. They're about to test whether the government can truly ban a corporation from paying to distribute a political film during an election year. If they win, the definition of free speech in American politics will be rewritten, and the path for billionaires to spend unlimited money will be blasted wide open. The next phase won't just bend the system. It will shatter the old distinction between ordinary citizens and those who can buy megaphones the size of entire states. Read aloud clearly, at an average speed, not too fast, not too slow. The year is 2007. Election season is heating up, and one candidate dominates every prediction, every headline, every poll: Hillary Clinton. But in the background, a small conservative nonprofit, Citizens United, is plotting something unusual. They produce a full-length documentary attacking Clinton's character and record. It's not a subtle film. It's designed to damage her. But here's the key. The film never says the magic words. Vote against. Defeat. It's structured just like the issue ads of the 1990s. Only this time, it's 90 minutes long. And it's scheduled to air during the most sensitive window of the election, the exact moment when McCain-Feingold banned electioneering communications funded by corporations. In other words, the documentary is technically illegal. Citizens United knows this. They want it to be illegal. They want a fight. Because they're not just trying to show the film, they're trying to break the law itself. So they sue the Federal Election Commission, and the case reaches the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of 2010 is not the court of Watergate. It's not even the court of the 1990s. It's a court shaped by decades of conservative legal activism, much of it inspired by Lewis Powell's memo calling for corporations to gain more political influence. What Powell argued in 1971, that corporations should use the courts to expand their political power, is now coming full circle. 5 justices see McCain-Feingold not as a safeguard, but as government censorship. If a corporation wants to spend its money making a political film, who is Congress to interfere? They frame it as a First Amendment question. Is political speech less worthy just because the speaker is a corporation? In January 2010, the court issues the ruling that will change American politics for a generation. Corporations are allowed to spend unlimited money on political advocacy. Unions are too. As long as they don't directly coordinate with campaigns, their spending is protected speech. And with that stroke of a pen, the last major barrier collapses. This isn't just a crack in the dam. This is the dam exploding. Reformers predicted a tidal wave of corporate cash. ExxonMobil, Pfizer, Walmart, Google, marching into elections with unlimited budgets. But that's not exactly what happens. Because while corporations dabble in the new system, they don't become the primary players. Instead, something much more powerful rises from the ashes. The billionaire class. The rise of the super PAC. Even after Citizens United, one obstacle still remains. Regular PACs have strict contribution limits. They can't accept millions from one donor. But months after the Citizens United decision, a federal appellate court issues a ruling based on the Citizens United logic that creates something unprecedented. The super PAC. A super PAC can accept unlimited contributions from individuals, corporations, and unions, spend unlimited money on political messaging, operate with almost no practical restrictions, unless they avoid coordination with official campaigns. Coordination, by the way, has been defined so loosely it's practically meaningless. This is the moment Jonald has been waiting for his entire life. All the pipes flowing with small amounts of regulated money, from people to candidates to parties, still exist. But now, standing next to those narrow pipes is a new one. A massive, open pipe with no cap at all. A pipe that leads directly from the bank accounts of the ultra-wealthy into the bloodstream of political messaging. And the best part? Even that pipe has a workaround for disclosure. The dark money loophole. Super PACs still must disclose their donors. But the law doesn't say those donors have to be people. So billionaires create non-profit organizations, shell entities with names like Americans for Prosperity Action, Patriot Freedom Fund, Citizens for a Better Future, America First Policies, Better America, as our fictional friend Jonald prefers. These nonprofits are often structured as social welfare organizations under 501c4 rules. They can accept unlimited donations from anyone, spend unlimited money on public advocacy, donate unlimited money to super PACs, and most importantly, they don't have to disclose their own donors. So here's how the smart billionaires play the game. Billionaire, 501c4 nonprofit. This transaction is secret. 501c4, super PAC. This transaction is disclosed publicly. Super PAC, political ads. These are labeled paid for by XYZ super PAC. When watchdogs look at the paperwork, all they see is donation, $10 million from Better America Initiative, not the billionaire behind it. For Jonald, this is perfect. The opaque pipe, he says, almost misty-eyed. The thing I've always wanted. By 2012 and 2016, super PAC spending explodes. By 2020 and 2024, it becomes the dominant force in American elections. And the people using it aren't corporations, but individuals, a tiny cohort of ultra-wealthy donors. People like Sheldon Adelson, Michael Bloomberg, Ken Griffin, Timothy Mellon, Tom Steyer, Peter Thiel, and of course, Elon Musk. The old fear that ExxonMobil would take over elections was wrong. Instead, it's a handful of individuals, often just 2 or 3 billionaires per cycle, who shape the airwaves, the narratives, the agendas. In 2024, just 2 men, Musk and Mellon, outspent every corporation in America put together. The new system isn't corporate democracy. It's billionaire democracy. People wonder, why would someone spend $50 million or $200 million on politics? Isn't that insane? Not if you think like Jonald. He's not buying an election. He's making an investment. And the returns can be staggering. Take Liz and Dick, a wealthy couple who run a box empire. In 2016, they gave roughly $8 million to super PACs supporting one Senate candidate. He won. A year later, during a hectic rewrite of the tax code, this senator quietly inserted a new provision that dramatically reduced taxes on certain kinds of pass-through businesses. Liz and Dick saved over $40 million the following year. That's a 500% return. Not bad for an investment in democracy. There's a popular idea that big donors get cushy diplomatic posts. Iceland, Switzerland, Malta, Canada. And yes, many do, including donors who don't speak the local languages. But for true players like Jonald, that's small time. He doesn't want a 4-year vacation in Luxembourg. He wants leverage over regulations, taxes, antitrust enforcement, energy policy, immigration, trade, defense contracting, crypto, AI, banking, digital privacy laws. These aren't perks. These are shapers of markets. Billions hang on these decisions. If getting the right guy into office costs you $10 million and helps your industry avoid $3 billion in future regulation, that's math, not ideology. No case illustrates this better than Peter Thiel's 2021 strategy. 2 former employees from his venture funds are running for Senate. They're polling at 1%. Dead candidates walking. Then, Thiel drops a combined $20 million into super PACs supporting them. Overnight, their name recognition skyrockets. Attack ads flood the states. Their rivals are suddenly outspent 20-1. Trump notices. He endorses them. One loses. The other wins. That man, J.D. Vance, is now vice president. And he echoes many of Thiel's core interests. Pro-crypto, anti-regulation for emerging tech, skeptical of government oversight and AI, aggressive on cultural issues, supportive of building parallel institutions to challenge mainstream systems. Was this quid pro quo? No. Was it expected? Probably. Was it predictable? Absolutely. Thiel is not buying favors. He's buying worldviews. And when those worldviews enter office, they shape national priorities. Not by scandal, by design. And then there is Musk. His $290 million in political spending during the 2024 cycle didn't just support Trump. It reshaped the architecture of governance. Within weeks of the election, Musk is appointed head of a new Department of Government Efficiency. His team gains access to the Treasury Department's payment systems. He begins restructuring federal agencies using Silicon Valley management principles. This is unprecedented access. No donor in modern American history, not the Kochs, not Soros, not Sheldon Adelson, has ever had this level of institutional influence so quickly. And all of it hinged on a narrow legal definition. If you spend independently, you are not corrupting the candidate. But the real world isn't that simple. Spend $20 million helping someone win an election, and they don't owe you a favor. They owe you their victory. And that creates a gravitational pull no court ruling can wish away. The data that should terrify everyone. Political scientists at Princeton and Northwestern studied thousands of policy decisions over 20 years. Their conclusion: average citizens have little to no influence on the decisions of their elected officials. The study continued: even when ordinary Americans get what they want, it's usually because wealthy elites want the same thing. They ended with a warning: our findings probably underestimate the influence of economic elites. This isn't hidden corruption. This is structural substitution, where public preferences get replaced by donor preferences. It isn't bribery, it's drift. A democracy begins drifting, quietly, legally, toward the priorities of people who can afford to invest in elections like a business opportunity. The billionaire's fear. Jonald has been smug for most of this story, but now he's nervous. Because of this chart. 72% of Americans believe unlimited spending in politics is wrong. Only 11% support the current system. That's not a partisan divide, it's universal. If Americans ever stopped fighting each other long enough to look at this one issue, they might actually demand change. And that terrifies people like Jonald more than any election outcome. I need you all to stay distracted, he says. Argue about cultural issues. Fight online. Don't look up. Don't notice the pipes. Don't fix them. And above all, don't get curious. Because curiosity is the billionaire's kryptonite. If regular people stop finding campaign finance boring, the entire system becomes unstable. The loopholes exist because the public isn't looking. Once they do, everything can change. And one billionaire's $10 million investment suddenly looks very fragile. The curtain has been pulled back. The pipes, the loopholes, the middlemen, the billionaires moving money through legal tunnels beneath democracy, all of it is now visible. But to understand how the modern system truly functions, we need to zoom out and look at the original mistake that allowed it to grow into what it is today. The logic that broke democracy. When the Supreme Court reshaped campaign finance in the 1970s, it cleanly separated two ideas. One, giving money directly to a candidate, regulated because it could corrupt. Two, spending money independently, unlimited because it was speech. The court believed that only direct giving created quid pro quo corruption, the briefcase of cash, the wink and nod, the cigar smoke deal. But independent spending? They saw it as harmless, as political expression protected by the First Amendment. This was a philosophical idea written in an era before the Internet, political data analytics, A/B-tested micro-targeting, dark money nonprofits, billionaire class influence, trillion-dollar corporations, and algorithmic manipulation. In a world of 3 TV networks, this logic seemed abstract. Today, it looks delusional. Because the idea that spending doesn't influence politicians, it never matched reality. And the billionaire class understood this decades before the public ever caught a glimpse. The invisible rulers of public policy. The Princeton Northwestern study wasn't just depressing, it was a diagnosis. It demonstrated that America had become what political scientists call an oligarchy with democratic features. Elections still happen, votes still matter. But when policy is written, when laws are drafted, when loopholes are carved into 2,000-page bills at 3 a.m., the hands guiding the pen overwhelmingly belong to donors, industry groups, wealthy benefactors, ideological billionaires, and the consultants who orbit them. This isn't conspiracy, it's structure. The pipes were built this way. The courts allowed it. Congress adapted to it, and the billionaires optimized it. Most Americans feel something is wrong, but they can't always articulate why, because they were never supposed to see the machine. The game behind the game. For someone like Jonald, political spending isn't charity. It's a calculated move in a deeper strategy. He's not just trying to elect candidates. He's trying to shape their incentives, not through bribery, through architecture. Because once a politician enters office, they know their re-election depends on donor support. Their agenda success depends on wealthy backers. Their political survival depends on super PAC air cover. You don't need a quid pro quo. You need a system where elected officials understand who fuels the oxygen in the room. And nothing does that better than independent spending. $5 million can flip a House race. $20 million can decide a Senate seat. $100 million can tilt a presidential battleground. Money doesn't guarantee victory, but it guarantees power. The power to set the agenda, the power to choose which bills see daylight, the power to frame the public conversation, the power to punish or reward candidates for ideological obedience. This isn't corruption, this is gravity. Serious, cinematic, documentary tone. Read aloud clearly at an average speed, not too fast, not too slow. The tectonic shift of 2024. The 2024 election wasn't just expensive, it was transformative. Nearly $15 billion was spent, but the shock wasn't the total. The shock was the concentration. A handful of ultra-wealthy donors spent more than every union, every corporation, every grassroots donor, every political party combined. This isn't hyperbole. This is math. And with Musk's record-shattering $290 million, a new threshold was crossed. A single individual became one of the most powerful political forces in the nation. And he didn't break one law to do it. Access is the real currency. People misunderstand what billionaires want. They don't want an ambassador post, a photo op, a medal, a ribbon-cutting ceremony. They want something far more valuable, a seat at the table where the real decisions are made. And in 2025, Musk got exactly that. Oversight of government efficiency, access to the Treasury Department systems, influence inside the executive branch, a direct pipeline into regulatory conversations. No billionaire in modern history has achieved that so quickly, not because of corruption, but because the system rewards whoever can fund the largest megaphone. When you help write the story of the election, you get to help write the story of the presidency. The great American paradox. Here's the contradiction at the heart of it all. Americans overwhelmingly hate the system, but the system is perfectly legal. 72% believe unlimited political spending is wrong. Only 11% support it. Left, right, center, it doesn't matter. Everyone agrees on this issue. But agreement doesn't translate into reform. Why? Because reform threatens the people who control the agenda. And those people don't lose elections, they buy insurance policies. Super PACs are that insurance policy. Dark money nonprofits are that insurance policy. Opaque donor networks are that insurance policy. And as long as citizens stay distracted, as long as they believe the fight is left versus right, they won't see the deeper battle. People versus power. representation versus influence, democracy versus ownership. The one thing billionaires fear. Jonald isn't afraid of regulation, Congress, watchdogs, journalists, even scandals. He's afraid of something much simpler: you paying attention. He's terrified that people will share this information, talk about campaign finance, demand transparency, demand limits, demand reform, demand accountability, demand democracy, demand to see the pipes. Because once you see the architecture, you understand how fragile it really is. The system wasn't built by accident, but it can be changed on purpose. One law, one ruling, one reform bill, one moment of public unity. That's all it takes. And billionaires know it. That's why they need you fighting over cultural battles while they shape the structural ones. That's why they need you bored, confused, tired, distracted. Because apathy is the most valuable political asset in the world. It costs nothing, and it protects everything. The final reveal. When people say billionaires stole America's elections, it doesn't mean they rigged voting machines or manipulated ballots or hacked the system. The truth is more unsettling. They stole elections by following the rules. Rules written by Congress, interpreted by courts, ignored by the public, optimized by the wealthy. They stole elections the way empires fall, slowly at first, and then all at once. And in the end, the greatest political heist in modern American history was committed right in front of everyone, because nobody thought to look. Outro. The question that decides the future. Every democracy has a breaking point. Sometimes it's loud. Sometimes it's violent. Sometimes it's sudden. But sometimes, like now, it's quiet, silent, elegant, legal. The question is not, how did this happen? The real question is, what happens next? Because systems like this only survive when people believe they are powerless. But the moment the public lifts their eyes, the moment they refuse to stay bored, the moment they stop fighting each other and start examining the machine, everything can change. The question is simple. Will they? Will you? Because the future of American democracy will not be decided by billionaires. It will be decided by whether the people realize they still have power before the people who bought the system convince them that they don't.